Hello, my name is Karen Patterson from the Rowallan and Slieve Crib Community Twinning Group. We believe passionately in local history projects, and we have commissioned a series of online lectures by historian Horace Reid. Horace has been researching our local history in County Down since 1990. Horace presents regularly to local historical societies and publishes in local newspapers. Over the years, he has compiled a wide variety of highly illustrated slideshows. We are grateful for the support from Newrymoore and Down District Council for this important historical project. I shall now hand over to Horace to introduce the presentation.
Montalto House in Ballynahinch is unique in that it has been home to 5 family dynasties so far. Other big houses in County Down, just one family has generally been attached. The story began here in the pre-plantation era with the McCartans, a Gaelic family who lived on this site and had a principal residence here. They were displaced by the Rawdons, the first English planters who occupied the district. And then came the Kers, a mercantile family with Scottish Presbyterian origins. And fourthly came the Clanwilliams, a dynasty of fighting men, both admirals and generals, who were servants of empire at a very high level. The house itself had a disastrous fire in the 1980s and was almost lost. But then came dynasty number 5, the Wilsons, who did an immaculate restoration of the house back to its 18th century and 19th century originals. So I'm going to talk you through the 5 family dynasties who lived here. So here we have a summary of the 5 families associated with Montalto. Starting for top left are the McCartans, who occupied the Ballynahinch area and owned the Montalto area in the pre-plantation era for hundreds of years. Secondly, the Rawdons, who were the first of the English settlers in the area. And you see here one of the Rawdon members, Francis Rawdon. Number 3, you see Richard Carr here. The Carrs were originally a Presbyterian family from Scotland. They were merchants who sold linen. They came to Ireland and County Down and bought land here. They started off in Port of Vaux, but eventually they moved to Ballynahinch. They were succeeded by the Clanwilliams, bottom right. You see the 5th Earl Clanwilliam. The Clanwilliams were fighting men, always worked in the service of empire, either as diplomats or soldiers or sailors. Generally were absentees living in London, but eventually they came and settled in Ballynahinch. And then finally, number 5, the Wilsons, a family who made their money in industry, and then having decided to retire from industry, invested their money in the preservation of culture and heritage, particularly the heritage of Montalto House in Ballynahinch. So there's the summary there. The McCartans, who owned the area for hundreds of years before the plantation. The Rawdons, who were the midwives to the Ulster plantation around Lisburn and Ballynahinch. The Kers, who succeeded them, and several generations of the Kers lived at Montalto from 1798 to 1912. Succeeded by the Clanwilliams, who were here for 60 or 70 years, having moved from Guildhall near Dromore. And finally, the Wilsons, who bought Montalto 1994 and have been making major improvements to the house and to the estate, to the great benefit of Ballynahinch, and long may that continue. Starting off with the first dynasty, the McCartans. And Phelim McCartan lived at a house in Ballymaglave Ytre, Ballymaglave North, marked on the map and described as a thatched house in Ballymaglave Ytre. So this is not Montalto House, but it's the site of Montalto House. So the McCartans were the first to occupy that site. This map was compiled by Sir William Petty at the behest of Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell, having conquered Ireland, decided on confiscation of the land, confiscating it from the Gaelic families and handing it over to the new settlers. If you want to know about the McCartans, Sean McCartan has written an excellent history in 2013. It's bilingual. It's in French and in English. The McCartans spent 4 centuries repelling anybody who wanted to invade County Down. So, 1315, they fought against Edward Bruce. That's the brother of Robert the Bruce. In 1453, they fought against the Normans. They fought against the savages at Ardglass. 1567, they fought against the first of the settlers. They fought against the whites at Killalay. Come 1601, they were fighting against Queen Elizabeth I. And of the numerous invasions or attempted invasions of County Down, most of them didn't succeed. The invaders got thrown out again. The Normans failed and got thrown out. The Tudors succeeded where others had failed, and they defeated the McCartans and the other Gaelic tribes. So Queen Elizabeth confiscated land from some land from the McCartans at this time, including Dundrum Castle. The McCartans weren't on the back foot for long ever. So after Queen Elizabeth was long dead and Charles I was on the throne, and the English Civil War spilled over into County Down, Patrick McCartan attacked Lord Cromwell's castle in Downpatrick at the top of Irish Street. And that event was long remembered. So the English Civil War was settled in England. Cromwell finally defeated the King's forces. Then he turned his attention to Ireland and established his rule there. So then retribution came for those who had engaged in the fighting in 1641. And things caught up with Patrick McCartan, who had attacked Downpatrick. So Patrick went on trial at a commission in Carrickfergus, and that's his interrogation you see on the left-hand side there. And involved in the interrogation was Sir George Rawdon. This is where we first hear his name. So that interrogation is signed by Sir George Rawdon and it's signed by Patrick McCartan. So Patrick was convicted of rebellion and he was hanged at Carrickfergus in 1653. And we know this because Michael McCartan has researched the Cromwellian High Court of 1653 and has published those details. The Cromwell confiscated McCartan land in Kinlarty. Kinlarty is the barony surrounding Ballynahinch. So this was the second round of confiscations. First of all, Elizabeth I had confiscated McCartan land, and now Cromwell followed. So Patrick McCartan's land was confiscated. It was handed over to the Cromwell government. Cromwell couldn't afford to pay his troops in Ireland, so he handed the land then over to Colonel Fleetwood, who commanded the forces in Ireland. And then Fleetwood distributed the land to his cavalrymen. The English cavalrymen who had come to Ireland weren't terribly happy about being paid in Irish land. To use the land, they would have to stay in Ireland, and that was the last thing they had on their mind. So they pretty promptly sold the land at a knockdown price to Sir George Rawdon. That's the same George Rawdon who had accomplished the execution of Patrick McCartan. So in Down Museum, on their display, you'll see the detail that Patrick McCartan sold Ballynahinch to George Rawdon and William Petty. So that, in fact, is not correct. Patrick was dead, having been executed. Then his land was confiscated. And then, in an indirect fashion, it came into the hands of Sir George Rawdon. So Sir George is the new landlord of the Ballynahinch area. And it's at this stage that the new planters, the new colonists, take over from Gaelic rule. Now, the Rawdons originally lived at Moira in County Down. And Moira Castle is demolished, but in Moira Domain, which still exists, you can see the foundations of Moira Castle. So Moira Castle was built about 1690 by Sir Arthur Rawdon, who succeeded his father. The Rawdons didn't live in Ballynahinch at that stage, but they owned it. So Sir George got the charter for Ballynahinch from Charles II in 1683. The charter states that he erected a considerable town. I don't know what was in Ballynahinch before Sir George, but it was a town after he arrived. It's described as a new built town. So again, I'm not sure what was here before him. There weren't many Protestants around when he arrived in 1660, but he encouraged other colonists to come from England and from Wales to populate his estates in Ballynahinch and in Lisburn. He built 2 mills. One of those mills we still have, and we know where it is. It's Harrison's Mill down at the bottom of Church Road at Millbridge. He put the parish church in repair. That's old Mochardroll, not the present one. And he set out a large paved marketplace. And for hundreds of years after 1683, that was Ballynahinch Marketplace with its Thursday market as established by the 1683 charter. Now, the new colonists didn't have a firm grip on Ballynahinch, and in 1689, the Protestants got chased out of County Down and chased out of Ballynahinch by an invasion of King James II's troops, which came north. So they were opposed by County Down Protestants. Sir George Rawdon is dead at this stage, but his son then opposed King James's forces. And Sir Arthur Rawdon fought them at Dromore, but was defeated in what was known as the Break of Dromore. So we're not too sure at this stage if the Rawdon dynasty will survive, but it does, because in 1690 King William arrives, defeats the forces of King James II. So you've got the Protestants in the ascendancy again, and the Rawdon possession of Ballynahinch is confirmed. There was a century of peace after 1690, so eventually the Rawdons decided that Ballynahinch had settled down, was quite a peaceful area. The other thing was that the existing Rawdon, now created as Lord Mora, he was getting into financial difficulties. He was on his second wife, a blue-blooded aristocrat from England, Lady Elizabeth Hastings. So she did the necessary. She provided him with an heir and a spare and a couple of other kids. So then she declared that she hated the north and she detested Ballynahinch. So he built her a new palace in Dublin, which she found much more congenial in social terms. But that stretched his finances. So what he did was build himself a bachelor pad in Ballynahinch, Montalto House, a two-storey building at that stage. So as you can see, a smaller building than the one he had occupied in Mora, and a smaller one than he had built for the wife in Dublin. So she stayed in the palace in Dublin, and he stayed in the bachelor pad in Ballynahinch. This was downsizing. A frequent visitor to the house in Dublin and in Mora was the Reverend John Wesley, the founder of Methodism. The Rawdons were fond of Methodists. And the Reverend Wesley said of the Dublin mansion, "I was surprised to observe, though not a more grand, yet a far more elegant room than any I had ever seen in England." That was in 1775. So the interior decoration of these mansions was to a very high standard. And the same workmen who decorated the Dublin mansion were brought north to decorate part of Montalto. So the Dublin mansion is gone, and the one in Mora is gone. So the remains, the only remains we can see of that standard of decoration of the time are at Montalto. So you will see the original. One of the original rooms of 1760. It's the ladies' sitting room above the front door of the present house. So the great glory of this room is the ceiling, which in one description, it contains the plasterwork ceiling is of the very highest quality, probably by Robert West of Dublin, who was working around 1760. The most famous of the Rawdons was Francis, who eventually became the second Earl of Mora. So he was educated by the Reverend Duberdew in Bow Street in Lisburn, and then went to university. Didn't finish his degree. At the age of 20, joined the army and went off to fight the American colonists in the War of Independence. So here you see him fighting at the Battle of Bunker's Hill in 1775. The British are at the point of defeating the Americans, and Rawdon is carrying the British standard to the top of the hill personally to signal the victory. He got shot in his hat at that stage and very nearly killed, but he survived the wound, and that was typical of his action throughout that war, where he was very aggressive and very proficient as a soldier, received rapid promotion. On his return to England, he was celebrated because of his success as a general in the American War, and he was appointed aide-de-camp to George III. And he made friends with two of the royal princes. He was a very close friend of the Prince of Wales. Prince of Wales was later the Prince Regent and later George IV. The relationship was so close that Mora lent money to the Prince of Wales, which he never got back again. And it was also his job to accompany the prince to his wedding and to ensure that the prince stayed sober for his wedding. So Mora was not successful in that endeavour, and the prince arrived drunk. He was also very friendly with the Duke of York, who was the head of the British Army. The Duke of York invaded Flanders in 1794 at the head of a British army to attack the French, got himself into very severe trouble, almost got captured. Mora, an experienced general from the American War, was sent to rescue him and did rescue him successfully. As a result of that, Mora's portrait, which you see here, executed by Thomas Reynolds, was presented to the Duke of York, then found its way into the royal collection, and is currently on display at Hillsborough Castle. Hillsborough Castle is now part of the Royal Palace's collection. So this painting is in Hillsborough now as a loan from the Queen's collection. The Rawdons were Whigs, and they were on the liberal wing of policy, as Whigs would be. And evidence of the Whigs, of the Rawdons' liberal outlook. Lord Mora was tolerant of Catholics and of Presbyterians and, as we've heard, of Methodists. And the evidence of his toleration was that in 1790 he gave financial donations to the local churches. He paid 10 guineas to the Cedars in Ballynahinch. That's succeeded, that later became Edengrove. He paid 10 guineas to St McCartans Catholic Church in Loughin Island. He paid Kilmore, now called Redemin, 10 guineas. And he paid First Saintfield and Second Saintfield 10 guineas each. So that was an unusual attitude within an Irish aristocrat to tolerate those religious groups or support them. Further evidence of the Rawdons' liberal outlook was when they entertained Wolfe Tone at Montalto on the 16th of August 1792. You see that I'm featuring the Montalto House still as a two-storey house, as it was in the Rawdon period. And Lord Mora's wife entertained the United Irishmen at her house in Dublin: Wolfe Tone, Thomas Russell, Lord Edward, William Sampson, Thomas Emmet, and Robert Emmet. Now, Wolfe Tone had an ulterior motive when he came to Montalto. He was courting the second Earl, who at that stage was called Lord Mora, and he didn't tell Lord Rawdon, but his intention was that he would tempt Lord Rawdon into joining the United Irishmen. So that attempt and his very presence at Montalto allowed an accusation to grow up that Francis, the second Earl of Mora, was sympathetic to the United Irishmen and was sympathetic to rebellion. Now, that's quite wrong. This is 1792, and at that stage the United Irishmen are a political ginger group. It's only in 1795 that they become a paramilitary organisation and engage in treason. Both the first Earl of Mora and the second Earl of Mora were always loyal citizens of King George and wouldn't countenance treason. The second Earl, at that stage called Lord Rawdon, made an important speech in the Irish House of Lords in February 1798. In the approach to rebellion, everybody knew rebellion was coming. Everybody knew the rebels were arming, making pikes, importing muskets, storing gunpowder. The government declared martial law in County Down, and the army started carrying out arms searches in all the local cottages. And they weren't very particular in the methods they used to extract information and to uncover the arms. So quite often the army used straightforward torture to extract information, so that they would find who was making the pikes and where the pikes were stored. But actually, torture was illegal in Great Britain at the time. So Mora, as a constitutional politician, was outraged. He carefully collected evidence of army atrocities, and then he exposed these army atrocities, both in the English House of Lords and in the Irish House of Lords. Irish House of Lords then was on College Green, opposite Trinity in Dublin. So this created quite a furore. His speech to the Lords was printed, and then the reply from the Lord Chancellor, the Earl of Clare, it was printed as well. So Dublin Castle wasn't pleased with Mora opening his mouth too much and exposing the kind of methods they were using. So the general officer commanding himself in person visited Montalto and carried out an arms search. And lo and behold, he found some pikes in Lord Mora's premises at Montalto. So I don't know whether those pikes were there or whether they were planted, but Mora took the hint that the army were getting very heavy-handed, and he rather thought that the next thing that would happen would be that there'd be an accidental fire at Montalto. So there was a very valuable collection of books belonging to his father. So Mora exported those books to another house in England, just in case anything would happen to them. The Rawdons had moved to Ballynahinch in the expectation that it was a nice, peaceful place. They were deceived in that expectation. When the Battle of Ballynahinch was fought, an awful lot of it was fought inside the Montalto domain. And in this painting of the battle, you can see Montalto House featuring. And if you look closely, you'll see two red lines behind Montalto House. So that is the Argyll Fencibles, forming two lines of musket fire and advancing through the domain to capture the rebel headquarters on top of Edenavady Hill. During that fighting, the rebels occupied Montalto House and fired out at the Monaghan militia. Monaghan militia had suffered some dead during the fighting, and their blood was up. So they took the simple method of setting fire to Montalto House. General Nugent had no difficulty at all with the Monaghans burning down Ballynahinch. It was a nest of rebels, but it was an entirely different matter when the Monaghans started burning down the house of an aristocrat. So Nugent told them to stop that, boys, and sent them down to the lake outside Montalto, and they brought water from the lake and put the fire in Montalto House out. So some damage, but not a lot. Mora, the first Earl of Mora is now dead. The second Earl, the father had been resident in Montalto always. The second Earl was an absentee most of the time, pursuing a political career in England. He was thoroughly disgusted with his tenants in Ballynahinch organising a rebellion on his front lawn. So he sold, the battle happened in June 1798, and the second Earl sold the Montalto Estate in September 1798. He had three careers. When he was still called Lord Rawdon, He was a hero of the American War of Independence. Then, when his father died and he became Lord Morra, he started a political career. He was prominent in Irish and English politics, and a close friend of King George IV. And under the auspices of King George IV, he was a candidate for Prime Minister at Westminster in 1812. Having failed to occupy that position, he was sent off to India and became Governor General there. So he had a successful military career in India. He conquered the Gurkhas in Nepal, and he added Central India, Singapore and Ceylon to the British Empire. So not altogether successful as a politician in England or Ireland, but very successful as a soldier both in America and India. Here he is in India. The only way to get around then was on the back of an elephant. And if he was touring his wide domains right up to the Himalayas, as you can see here, then he had to be accompanied by an army because there were plenty of Indian princes who would like to attack him. He took the wife with him and the kids. So that's him and the wife on matching jumbos doing a tour of northern India. He's Ballynahinch's most famous export, but Ballynahinch doesn't know a lot about him, and in fact most historians would tell you they don't know a lot about him. We know all about Francis Rawdon Crozier of Banbridge, who died exploring the Northwest Passage. We know about Francis Rawdon Chesney of Kilkeel, who explored the new passage for the Suez Canal and is described as the father of the Suez Canal. So both those men are named after Lord Morra, and they're famous, but we never get to hear about Morra himself, the man they're named after. We know all about Robert Rollo Gillespie of Cumber, who was killed in fighting the Gurkhas in Nepal. One shot more for the honour of Down. So we know Gillespie, but we don't know Morra, who was his boss when he was fighting in Nepal. There were three famous Irishmen in the early 1800s, the Duke of Wellington, Lord Castlereagh and Lord Morra. So I think what happens is that Wellington and Castlereagh are so famous that they eclipse Morra, who's not quite so famous. So Morra is certainly on the first 11, but he's not captain of the team. Now we come to the third of the dynasties who own Montalto, and this is the Kers. And like I told you, they started off as Scottish Presbyterians. They got involved in the linen trade. They moved their operation to London. Made a lot of money selling linen in London. Then they moved into pure finance in the city of London, and having made lots of money then, they wanted to invest their money in a Presbyterian area, so they didn't go to Scotland, they came to County Down. Started off buying an estate in Portavoe. In 1800, when Lord Morra sold the estate, David Kerr from Portavoe bought Montalto. He bought Montalto at a knockdown price because it was a fire sale, literally a fire sale, because Ballynahinch had been burned down and Montalto House had been partly damaged by fire. So David Kerr bought the town in a knockdown sale. His successor, the second David Kerr, rebuilt Montalto in 1837, and they rebuilt it by excavating it had a cellar. So what the Kers did was excavate the cellar and turn the cellar into the new ground floor, and then every floor moved up one story. Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just put an extra story on the top? Well, I think it's you saw those precious that precious plasterwork in the original 1760 house. So I think they always wanted to preserve that plasterwork, and that was one way to increase the size of the house, but keep the original precious details. In the painting, bottom right-hand side, you see. That was the 1798 painting, and you see Montalto House as a two-story building. So the thing is, what was that two-story building like? And architectural historians like Sir Charles Brett says that he was writing in the 1960s. He said, Montalto is a mansion of the utmost interest, but documentary evidence is extremely scanty. So he was wondering what the original 1760 house was like. So he reckoned that this long corridor, which is now on the first story, he reckoned that that was the ground floor of and ran the full length of the original house, and he reckoned that the main entrance was at the end of that corridor. So. Subsequently, in this new century, the Wilsons have discovered an old painting of Montalto House, and Sir Charles Brett was right that the old original entrance to Montalto House was on the west wing. So you can see a set of stairs there and a Venetian doorway. And you see a triple Venetian window there, and that was the window which was at the end of the corridor, which ran the full width of the house. Now you can see that the Kers are remodeling the house in 1837. And what they're doing is digging out all the soil around the basement, and that converts the basement to the new ground floor. And the Health and Safety Agency have insisted that they put a protective fence around the excavations. On the right-hand side, you can see where the lawn is being excavated away, and it's leaving exposed earth and an embankment. Beside the old front door on the left-hand side, you can see the Kers have built a new west wing. So that's an addition to the 1760s building. In that new west wing, they installed a bow window. So that's how that new west wing looks now. And inside that new west wing, upstairs, they installed a drawing room. So you had a very decorative ceiling in the ladies' sitting room at the front of the house, but now you have an equally decorative one. It's what's called a cove ceiling, and it follows the perimeter of the room all the way around, including the bow window. So that room's carefully preserved, as with the original by the present owners, the Wilsons. So the Kers moved the entrance from the west wing round to the south front, where it still is. And they built a portico, sort of sheltered area on pillars, where you could drive a carriage in and be sheltered from the rain. That portico is no longer there. It was demolished in the 1840s during the famine. 1857, they built a ballroom beside the west wing. There's a photograph at the top left of the interior of the ballroom. So the walls were blank, and that's where they hung their paintings, and the light came into the ballroom from windows at second story level. The Rawdons, when they lived in Montalto, they were called Lord Mora. The Clanwilliams, the Meads, when they lived at Montalto, they were called Lord Clanwilliam. So when the Kers were at Montalto, why weren't they called Lord Ballynahinch? Well, the explanation is that David Kerr, who bought Montalto in the first place, didn't get married to the mother of his children, or he didn't until very, very late in life. So, so that meant that his children were actually illegitimate in the eyes of the law. So being illegitimate, they could never be promoted then to the peerage. So they remained plain Mr. Kers. But in terms of wealth, they were equal to or more wealthy than many of the aristocrats in County Down. So the Kers couldn't become aristocrats formally, but they joined the aristocracy informally, both in terms of wealth and in terms of their marriage connections. So David Gardy Kerr, the second of the Kerr generation, he married Lord Castlereagh's sister, Lord Castlereagh, from Mount Stuart. So he's the equal of any aristocrat. And he and his new wife lived initially at Montalto. And then Lord Londonderry from Mount Stuart came to visit the new couple at Montalto. And he and the new wife went off to London and celebrated the Lord Castlereagh, of course, was Foreign Secretary at the stage. So the newly married couple went off to London as guests of Castlereagh, and there they met dignitaries like the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Wellington. The Kers were very good at making money, and between 1786 and 1791 they quadrupled the size of their land holdings. You can see in this map here what land they owned and where. 1791 to 1802, they doubled the estate again. By 1811, they were among the top 5 landowners in the county. You can see that the bulk of their estates now are in South Down. They started off near Groomsport in Portavoe, but now the bulk of their estates is in South Down. So what they do is they move their headquarters from Portavoe to Montalto in Ballynahinch. All of these details, you see the book at the bottom right hand side, Portavoe. That's a history of the Kers written by Peter, C-A-R-R. So if you want to know the Kerr history in detail, including their time at Montalto, you'll find it in that book. Now there's a pattern among the owners of Montalto that the first 2 generations make the money, and the third generation gets rid of the money and gets into bankruptcy. So that happened with the Rawdons, and now it happens again with the Kers. So 3rd generation, David Stuart Kerr, had ambitions to be an MP. Being an MP was an expensive process. You had to spend huge amounts of money in bribery. So he won the 1852 election in County Down, but he did so at the expense of putting his estate into debt. So then he had to start selling land to settle the debts. If you sell land, that's killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. So he was very extravagant, and the money that was available, it was never enough for him. So he was declared bankrupt. Then he took to drink. So the estate was placed in the hands of the administrators, and one of the administrators was a solicitor from Downpatrick called Colonel Wallace. And Colonel Wallace was Lord Carson's right-hand man during the UVF episodes. And Colonel Wallace was a founder of the UVF and was the soldier who organised the import of arms at Larne for the UVF. The Kers then, for the remainder of their tenure of Montalto, were in a permanent state of bankruptcy, and it didn't worry them. They just continued spending away. Captain Dick Kerr had no visible means of financial support, but continued to lead a life of luxury. He was master of the County Down Staghounds. He stood for the 1884 by-election. Wasn't too worried about that responsibility. Fell off a horse at Killelea. Was carried on a stretcher to Finnebrogue, and spent the entire election campaign in bed beneath an eiderdown. He sent the wife out to do the campaigning for his election, and on the sheer force of charisma, he won the election while horizontal in a bed in Finnebrogue. So he kept defying financial and political gravity. Some of the remains of the Kers, they developed Spa as a resort. So in that era, you went to Bath to take the waters to restore your health. So the Kers had this great idea, well, there's a spa in Ballynahinch, so why don't we turn it into a resort? So they built the assembly rooms at Spa, and they built the two new wells. So these are patent pumps which they imported from London, made by Joseph Bramah. Bramah was the inventor of the flushing lavatory. So Harvey Bicker has rebuilt one of the pump houses in his back garden, and he's rescued the two pumps from the wells, and he's installed these pumps within the pump house. They no longer provide spa water, but they're a good reminder of the Kers resort. So now we come to dynasty number 4. Finally, the Kers had to leave Montalto. The bankruptcy courts caught up with them. So the next dynasty to occupy Montalto are the Meads. The Meads initially lived at Guildhall near Dromore. Guildhall is demolished now. The Clanwilliams never really lived in it. They depended on the Guildford Estate to provide them with an income, but they really got their support from their employment as servants of empire, either as diplomats or as soldiers or sailors. So they have a long history before they arrive in Ballynahinch, and I think it's worth. Although they were in Ballynahinch, although they spent most of their time based in Guildhall, I think it's worthwhile telling you about their history before they came to Montalto. The Clanwilliams based their wealth on 2 planter families, Robert Hawkins McGill, who owned Rathwyland, and Captain McGill, who owned the Guildford Estate elsewhere in County Down. So those 2 families united by marriage, and had considerable financial assets. Evidence of this is when Lady Anne Bligh came from England and married Robert Hawkins McGill. And you can see evidence of her wealth because some of her clothing survives. On the right, you see a photograph of her dress. This is a court dress. So it's made from Spitalfield silk. And it's very expensive and only to be worn in the presence of the monarch at court. So first commissioned 1760 and worn by every Clanwilliam heiress at court as late as 1845, preserved by the Clanwilliams and given to the National Trust, and currently on display at the Spring Hill Costume Museum. So early evidence of the wealth of the Clanwilliams. Lady Anne married the Hawkins, but he died within 4 years. So then she remarried, and she remarried Bernard Ward of Castle Ward. Now, you know the story about Castle Ward, that when it was rebuilt in 1762, he wanted a classical front and she wanted a Gothic front. So they didn't have to compromise. He got his classical front and she got the Gothic front as here. She had 7 children to Bernard Ward. She got Castle Ward rebuilt to her standards, but then she walked out on the marriage 4 years later, and then lived for another 23 years enjoying her grass widow lifestyle in Bath. Now, her marriage to the McGills lasted 4 years, and during that time she had a daughter called Theodosia. So Theodosia is the heiress of the Clanwilliams, and she's heiress to a huge fortune, age 3. Eventually she marries the first Earl of Clanwilliam, who comes from County Cork. He and she are both hugely extravagant. Evidence of her extravagance is that when she got married, she got not one portrait painted, but 2 portraits, both of them by the most expensive portrait painter in England. Both of these portraits now in the Ulster Museum. So the 2 of them were so extravagant that they got through all the property of the Cork estate, leaving Theodosia only in possession of the County Down estate. And in fact, she was so extravagant that she wanted her son, the firstborn and the heir, had to have an inheritance. But she even tried to rob the son, the second Earl, of his inheritance. Here you see a painting of the little boy and the mother, and that painting is on display at Castle Ward, where her mother had her second marriage. The second Earl of Clanwilliam didn't particularly like his mother, Theodosia, for very good reason. So he took off to the continent and lived in Austria and married an Austrian lady. They had three children in Vienna. He didn't live very long, neither did his wife live long. So their son then, when they died, their son was aged 10, so he was reared in England. So now we come on to the son, also called Richard. He's the 3rd Earl of Clanwilliam. Now remember his background. He's reared on the continent. He's multilingual. So he gets a very handy job in his adulthood. After the defeat of Napoleon, the Congress of Vienna is held, and the map of Europe has to be redrawn. Now, a principal actor in the redrawing of that map is Lord Castlereagh, the Foreign Secretary who was responsible for the defeat of Napoleon. So, of course, Castlereagh belongs to County Down. He lived at Mount Stewart. And when he's looking for a secretary, he chooses another County Down man who is Clanwilliam, and who is very well fitted to work as a diplomat on the continent because he's been brought up on the continent. So if you want to know about Clanwilliam's role as a diplomat, both at both at the Congress of Vienna and in the Foreign Office, take a look at the recent biography of Lord Castlereagh, written by John Bew. So you'll get a lot of references in that biography to the 3rd Earl of Clanwilliam. The 3rd Earl's son, Sir Robert Meade, performed useful service for the royal family. In 1862, the Prince of Wales had been very naughty. He went off to join the army. He was posted to Dublin, and his fellow officers in Dublin hosted a party for him and invited some lady friends along. So the trouble is, the news of that got to the papers and got to the ears of Queen Victoria, who didn't like what she heard. So for the reformation of his soul, the Prince of Wales was sent off on a tour of the Holy Land in company of Dr. Stanley, a clergyman. So to lighten matters for him, Sir Robert Meade was sent along, who managed the Prince's social life rather more to the Prince's liking. Now we come to the 4th Earl of Clanwilliam. The Clanwilliams were always fighting men. 3 of Theodosia's sons were in the army and fought Napoleon. One of them fought Napoleon in Egypt. The 4th Earl was a bit different. He joined the Navy. And there's a Gilbert and Sullivan line that he was the very model of a modern Major General. Well, Clanwilliam was the very model of a modern admiral. This was the era when Britannia ruled the waves. They hadn't moved to metal ships yet, but they were beginning to convert to steam propulsion. But Clanwilliam was of an age where he didn't trust this newfangled stuff. So if he could possibly avoid it, he didn't use the steam engines. He preferred to sail his ships under sail. Long naval career, culminating in being Admiral of the Fleet in 1895. Again, a close association between the royal family and the Clanwilliams. In 1879, King Edward VII thinks it would be good for his 2 sons if they spent some years at sea. It would help their education. So off they went to sea, age 14 and 15. So this is Prince Albert, who's the heir, and Prince George. Now, as it came about, Prince Albert died young, and King George, then he became king as King George V. So these are 2 precious articles who Queen Victoria isn't too keen on sending her grandsons to sea, but it's some comfort to her that Lord Clanwilliam will look after them. So they did a world tour, visiting Australia, Japan, got into danger sometimes, but Clanwilliam and his sailors always fished them out of danger. Here is the 4th Earl and the 5th Earl. The fifth Earl is on the right. So you have 2 admirals and two earls in this photograph. This is the 4th Earl and 3 of his sons. There's a 4th son missing from the photo. So as I tell you, the Clanwilliams were fighting men, and they had the wounds to prove it. They were always in the thick of the action, and they generally got wounded. And when they were wounded, then they received their medals, including an MC. Clanwilliam, second right, he's the 4th Earl. He's an admiral. To his left, on crutches and in hospital pajamas, is his son Herbert. Herbert is a sailor as well. He got an injury on board ship, and his leg was damaged and always ended up short, and he always had a limp. Didn't stop him. He continued his career, became an admiral, continued the connection with the royal family. When the next Prince of Wales went on a tour of the world and visited India, he went on a world tour in HMS Renown, and it was Herbert who piloted HMS Renown personally, including piloting it through the Suez Canal personally. So eventually he was promoted admiral as well. So these Clanwilliams, like I told you, didn't really live in Guildhall. They always lived in London, being active in the forces. The one who came to live at Montalto is the one on the right, Arthur. So there's Arthur there. He started his career accompanying Lord Curzon. Curzon was Viceroy of India. So this is typical Clanwilliams operating at the highest levels of the English establishment, operating at the highest levels of empire. He was a guards officer. He fought in the Boer War. He was wounded in the Boer War. This photograph is taken after he gets married and moves to Montalto. His wife was on her second marriage, and she was an experienced bride and a strong-minded woman, and she refused to live at Guildhall because Guildhall was notorious for being infested with ghosts. So the Kers of Montalto being in the throes of bankruptcy, Lord Clanwilliam bought Montalto, maybe at a bargain price. So then his new bride moved into Montalto, and that's where they had their family. So this is the first of the Clanwilliam families to live in their native Ireland. So this photograph was taken in 1916. The fifth Earl is in the Guards. He's busy fighting in the trenches in World War II. And he comes home dressed in uniform and visits the wife between terms in the trenches, and sees his young family growing up. And that's his heir, the sixth Earl, Lord Guildford, on his mother's knee. So pretty tough times for Lady Clanwilliam, bringing up the young family on her own at Montalto while her husband's away fighting in the trenches, and she never knows if he's going to come back alive. Time was when the owners of Montalto owned all the town lands around and owned all the houses in Ballynahinch, and none of the farmers were owners, they were tenants. None of the householders in Ballynahinch were owners, they were tenants and paid rent to Montalto. That system ended with the Wyndham Land Act about 1904. So the Kers were the last owners of Montalto to draw their income from rents. But the connection between Ballynahinch, the people of Ballynahinch, and the owners of Montalto continued. So even though the Clanwilliams no longer owned property in Ballynahinch, there was a connection and an affection between the townspeople and the big house. So in 1923, when there was a wedding at Montalto, this photograph is taken. What's happening here is the wedding was in Muckerdole Parish Church, and these are all the taxis coming down Church Street, coming down Dromore Street on their way to Montalto. So the whole town turns out to celebrate the wedding and to wish the happy couple well. And the town is decorated with bunting and Union Jacks. Now this isn't the 12th, this is September. So there's quite an affection for the Ballynahinch people towards the occupants of the big house, and that's why the flags are all out. You see the scouts turned out on parade, and in front of them Ballynahinch pipe band. The next Earl of Clanwilliams was the 6th Earl, again like the 5th Earl, resident at Montalto. Again a fighting man, served with the Grenadier Guards in France, Palestine and against Rommel in North Africa. Before he retired, he was the officer commanding of the garrison at the Tower of London. Once the owners of Montalto could no longer draw rent from the surrounding farms, they found they could no longer afford to run the big house. So, getting into financial difficulties, the latest Lord Clanwilliam tried to reduce the rates bill and every other bill by demolishing parts of the house that he didn't need. So he demolished the servants' wing, and then he demolished the ballroom. But still, he can't make the place make money. So, in March 1979, he decides he'll have to put the place on the market. And it goes for the tidy sum of £1 million. It's bought by a commercial conglomerate, the Hogg and Corrie families, who try to run the Montalto Estate on a commercial basis, developing the dairy industry, for instance. During their ownership, the house has a disastrous fire in 1985. So the rear wing is burned out, as is most of the east wing. Now, actually, that's a very fortunate pattern of incineration, because that leaves the Car west wing still intact with its cove ceiling, and it leaves Lord Morrow's original 1760 rooms at the front of the house. It leaves them intact. So this is extremely fortunate. Now, in 1993, along come Gordon and June Wilson, millionaires as the result of the profits from F.G. Wilson in Larne. So they decide to invest their money in a family project. They bought Montalto as a family home. Decided that's where they'd bring up their kids. And they decided to put their money into restoration. And none of your DIY stuff. They wanted to do it properly. So they engaged a firm of architects familiar with conservation and an architect familiar with conservation, John O'Connell from Dublin. John O'Connell was the conservation architect who restored Government House in Hillsborough. So they spent 12 years renovating Montalto. No half measures at any stage, root and branch rebuild. And then in 2011, they opened the place as a 5-star venue for weddings and corporate entertaining. And they've continued to expand its facilities since. The idea being that if you have a grand mansion, it has to be maintained, but you'll never maintain it unless you have an income. So that's why they open the house and the grounds to generate an income to preserve the house. The first thing they were up against was the rebuilding of it after the fire. So they didn't rebuild it exactly as it had been before. You see the east wing. Originally it was 3-story throughout. So they thought no need to go to that length. What they did was to copy the Kers had built the west wing with a bow front in the 1840s. So they thought, let's duplicate that on the east wing. So that's the east wing as it was rebuilt with grants from Historic Monuments in 1994. And there's the full-blown restoration. This is of the 1760 Sir John Rawdon build at the front of the house with its cove ceiling. Now, let's look at how much work went into this restoration. Gordon Wilson took his own photographs throughout the restoration, which he very kindly loaned me. So the room you've just seen there with its cove ceiling was in very bad shape when the Wilsons first got the house. The roof had been leaking, so you can see the plaster ceiling is covered in mould. And if a plaster ceiling, if it gets wet long enough, it'll fall. So the cove section around the edge, it's been affected by damp, and those timbers are damp, so you've got to expose them and replace them. Above the windows there had been wooden lintels, and then over the 234 years since, those lintels had rotted and the brick was starting to descend and obstruct the windows. So you had to dig out those wooden lintels and replace them with the concrete. When you if you're going to do a renovation, you better do it all at once. So you strip off all the plaster, get down to the basic brickwork, and that will let you know what problems you've got. So you fix all the problems at once. The great thing about stripping the plaster off is that lets you see how it's a form of archaeology. It lets you see how the house was constructed in the first place. So the exterior of Montalto is finished in decorative stone, but the core of the building was built much cheaply. A lot of it was built on brick, and brick was handy because if you wanted to make a bow window and you wanted to shape the window insertion, it was easy to pick the bricks which would allow that. But then if you look at the photo on the right-hand side, where there were no windows and where you just had a blank wall, well, Lord Morrow decided he wouldn't spend too much money. So instead of using brick, he just used random rubble that you could pick off the fields in the surrounding area. So he didn't spend any more money than he had to. But revealing a piece of archaeology that. This is upstairs in the second floor. This was renovations done by the Kers when they were renovating the bedrooms. So it showed you how you didn't have plasterboard then. So what you did was put up a framework, and then you covered the framework in laths, and then you put on the plaster, and the plaster went through a gap in the laths, and then it adhered. And if you wanted to do not a 90-degree corner but a rounded corner, then this is how it was accomplished. The herringbone struts, the herringbone connections between the upright, that arrangement is called dwangs. So again, an interesting look at the Victorian archaeology. I told you that in the ladies' sitting room you had some very precious plasterwork put in by a Dublin artist in 1760. Now that ceiling is right below the joists in this room here. So the joists at the end are turning rotten, and you can see they've turned black. And the timbers in the cove ceiling above They've turned rotten, so they have been renewed. But you can't renew the joists in the floor, because if you take those joists away, you destroy the precious ceiling below. So this floor is dangerous, and you couldn't allow the Clanwilliams wouldn't allow anybody into this room, because if they collapsed the joists by walking on them, you would destroy the ceiling below. So you couldn't replace the joists. So what you did was go in and carefully reinforce the joists with new timber. So you can see all the joists now are two colour. You have the old orange colour of joists, the original, but then you have them reinforced with new timber. So once you do that, then the floor is sound again, and you can put the floorboards down. And going down to the level below, and there's that precious ceiling. And the same operation has to be carried out in the ladies' sitting room. The joists over a couple of hundred years have gradually given way. The floor is bowing. It's separating from the skirting boards. So again, you don't uproot the joists. You see the old yellow wood, and it's patched with new yellow patches. So this is individual reinforcement of individual joists. So this isn't carpentry, this is embroidery. And if you're doing conservation and restoration of an historic building, you've got to be very careful. You don't damage any of the work that you're building. So you see the alcoves at the back are protected from the builders, and the 18th century doorway on the right is protected, so the builders can't possibly damage it. This is the ground floor which the Kers turned in, the basement which the Kers turned into the ground floor. And it, as you can see, was built in brick by the Kers. Now, when Montalto was two-storey, there's an engraving, top right-hand side, of how the house was heated by coal fires, and you see smoke coming from every orifice. The trouble with coal fires is they leave soot, and they leave a deposit of soot right up the flues. So you can clean your chimneys, but after this study here has got 155 years of soot going up this chimney. So you can clean the flue all you like, but some soot will remain, and the soot eventually eats away at the mortar which lines the flue. And you only discover that when you try to alter the fireplace. And when you pull out the brickwork above the fireplace, the whole flue collapses because all the mortar holding it together has deteriorated. And that is true for the entire length of the flue, all the way from the fireplace to the chimney pots. And that is true for every flue in the house. So if you go to work in any room, you're up against that problem that the wall above the fireplace is going to collapse. So rather than wait for trouble coming to you, you go and meet the trouble. And the Wilsons renewed every flue in the house from the ground floor right to the rooftops. So if you're going to renovate and restore a house which is and a room which is 155 years old, you better know what kind of problems you're going to encounter and how much money you will have to expend. The archaeology of the house got revealed, like I say, a great time to do it when you take the plaster off. Sir Charles Brett wanted to know the archaeology of the house. Here's some of it revealed. In this room here, there's a huge arch made in brick on the left-hand side. What can this possibly be? So it turns out that this was the original stairwell of the original 1760 house. It's a narrow room, which is odd in itself, and a narrow room would be characteristic of a stairwell. So that's the line of the stairs going right to left, and there's the arch which is covering the upper end of the stairwell. So Sir Charles Brett wanted to know where the front door was, so we know where the front door was, but also now we know where the stairs were in Lord Morrow's original 1760 house. So I think that's enough to tell you. 5 dynasties there were. The McCartans were there, pre-plantation, followed by the Rawdons, with their the famous personalities of that family, followed by the Kers, famous as well, went to visit the Duke of Wellington and the Prince of Wales in London. Then the Clanwilliams, fighting men. An awful lot of history in Montalto. If you're looking for a Rawdon house, you won't find one in Ireland anymore. They're all demolished. So if you celebrate the Rawdon history, you have to do it at Montalto. If you're looking for a Car house, Portavoe was burned down, so the only Car house remaining now is Montalto. If you're looking for a Clanwilliam house, Guildhall is gone. So if you want a building associated with the Clanwilliams, it's only Montalto. So we're very grateful to the Wilsons that they preserved Montalto House. It could easily have been abandoned after the fire, but they invested a lot of money, but also a lot of skill and enthusiasm into restoring Montalto and preserving this as a resort and a place for pleasure in Ballynahinch, but it also preserves all the history associated with the families. I'd like to thank those who've contributed. If you want to check out the history as I've described it, you can go to the McCartan publications. For the Car period, Sir Charles Brett has written in his handbook for Mid-Down, and Peter Carr, as I've told you, wrote about the Cars in Portavoe. For the Clanwilliam period, Paul Bew tells you a lot about the 3rd Earl. For the Wilson period, I'm grateful to Gordon and David Wilson for giving me access, and to the late David Anderson, and I'm grateful to my brother who interpreted the photographs for me. So I'm grateful to all of those sources. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about Montalto. you.